How do we understand the strength of someone's character, whether they're toxic, whether they have high values, besides this, the things that we can see of like, okay, they broke their word or they're negative or things like that. How do we really determine someone's character?
Well, the first thing you have to do, the most important thing is to realize that determining people's character is the most important thing that you have to do in judging them. So normally we think if someone's very charming, that's great, or if they're really good looking, or if they're very successful. So if we're looking, let's say we're looking for a business partner or a romantic partner or a colleague to work with, we're going to base our decision on those kinds of appearances. Like people can be very good at deceiving you with being very charming and flattering, or they have a brilliant resume, and you'll be seduced by that. And what you want to do, the first step in that law is to say, no, that's not how I'm going to judge people. My main value is their character and the strength of their character. And character is something from deep, deep, deep within. The word character comes from the Greek kairos, which means to carve. And character is something really deeply carved inside the person.
Wow.
It's who they are at their core. It creates patterns of behavior that they can't even really control. It's who they are genetically. It's who they are from the early values of their parents. So you want to connect to that. You want to see that. It's not immediately visible to you because people will disguise their character. You want to see that and you want to value it more than anything else. And what you want are people with strong character. And what that means is people, they have an expression for metal, they call it tensile, where a metal is stronger if it can give a little bit. And because if something is too rigid, it breaks. So you want people who are adaptable, who can be fluid, who aren't weak, because that metal isn't weak, who have an inner strength and a core to them, but they can bend, they can learn, they can adapt, they can change. You want to see people who are empathetic, who know how to get along with other people. So if you have two people to choose and one has a glittering resume, but the other person understands human nature and is superior in a social sense and can also has a good work ethic, you choose that other person. You don't choose necessarily the person with that glittering resume. And so one of the things you look for are patterns in judging their character, because people reveal themselves in the past. They reveal who they are through their actions. They try and disguise it, but they reveal it. So I say in that chapter, nobody ever does anything once. So let's say you have a friend who does something kind of nasty to you. They talk behind your back. Then they'll say, oh, Robert, that was just, something came over. That isn't me. I'm sorry about that. That just happened. Circumstances made me do that. And you'll be likely to believe them. But the fact is, if they've done that once, they've probably done it many times. If people gossip and you hear them gossiping about other people, they'll probably eventually gossip about you. So you want to be able to look at people's patterns and look at their past and see trends and understand that if they've done certain things in the past, they will continue to do them because we humans have compulsive behavior. We are compelled to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again.
How do we stop that pattern? If we recognize it within ourselves, my character's been off, I've been doing something, for years a certain way that I don't want to do anymore. How do we do it so we can strengthen our character, but also say, I believe this other person can have a stronger character through breaking a pattern? Or is it just not possible?
Of course it's possible. At the end of every chapter, I show you how you can turn this potentially negative quality into a positive quality. So when it comes to you and your own patterns, you have to first realize that you have these patterns before you can even begin to break them.
So awareness.
Honesty. This is a book about awareness and being honest with yourself. If you don't admit that you have these patterns, then you can't possibly break them. I know in writing books, I have terrible, terrible patterns.
Like what?
Well, stressing so much over things that aren't that important.
Obsessing, stressing, yeah.
Obsessing. I take note cards for everything that I read, all my research, and I take way too much information. I have like thousands of them I'm writing, and I have to stop, and I say, stop being such a perfectionist. It's like you're wasting your time. It's been book after book after book. I'm very aware of it, and I'm very aware of breaking that pattern. But you have to see it and be honest with yourself in order to break it, you know?
Right.
So that's the first step, is seeing the pattern, and then not struggling against it, not trying to be somebody who you're not, but finding a way to use that pattern, to use that problem to your advantage. Similar to what Ryan Holiday wrote in his book, The Obstacle is the Way. I have an example in the book of an actress, Joan Crawford, from the Hollywood classical period. And she had a very troubled childhood. Didn't know her father, her mother beat her, men abused her, etc. And she managed to take, and it was creating terrible patterns in her life. And she found a way to turn that around, to use all of those disadvantages and make herself a much stronger and very powerful performer. Mm-hmm. By bringing all of the pain in her childhood into her acting, by becoming so focused on the director. Because she had been abused, she was very sensitive to other people. She used that sensitivity to focus on the director and other actors, to be in tune with them.
To connect with them, to build relationship, is that essentially?
Yeah. She was very aware of her own weaknesses and her own fragility, and she was able to use that as a strength. So with other people, it's never hopeless. I mean, some people are toxic. I talk a lot in there about toxic characters. People, those are the kinds of people who can't really change. Their patterns are too ingrained. And we've all met people like that. We've all had to deal with a narcissist who's so deeply self-absorbed. There's nothing that's ever going to save them or pull them out of that self-absorption.
Unless they have like a near-death experience, or they have someone close to them.
That's
like,
true.
You know, something where it's a big awakening.
That's true.
Or they get sick or whatever, right?
You're right. That happens. That does happen.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it does. But you have to be honest that there are people out there. You can't be naive. There are people out there who are toxic, who are dangerous, who can ruin your life. You hire the wrong person. And I've dealt with in my consulting, with a lot of people who hired a business partner who ended up sort of taking the business from them. Very common scenario. You have to not be naive and recognize these toxic types. And often it's best not to try and change them, because trying to change them entangles you in a lot of their drama.
And it's just never going to happen. You might be trying for years and wasting your time and energy.
But, you know, people have to be able to to change themselves. You know, they have to be motivated. You can help illuminate some of their patterns and their problems, but it has to come from within.
Yeah. Now you talk about the law of self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And, you know, we could self-sabotage ourselves by attracting toxic people, but also what are other ways that we sabotage ourselves?
Well, this is a chapter about your attitude in life, right? And the point of that chapter is related to human nature, is none of us see the world in the same way. So you and I could go watch a movie. It's the same movie that we're watching. I love it. I see something. You hate it. You see something else. You don't experience it the same way. We're watching the same world, the same reality, but we experience it differently. Everybody you meet is experiencing their world differently than you are. So you have an attitude that colors what you see. And some people have an attitude that tends towards the negative. And I describe a negative attitude as something that's closed. So you're not open to new experience. You're trying to close that lens. You have certain beliefs, certain ideas about life, and you're not willing to change them. Right? Because that gives you a sense of security. And so you want an attitude that's expansive, where you accept people, you're not always judging them, you're not negative about them, you understand that people can't necessarily help who they are. You're open to change, you're open to having adventure, and that kind of attitude kind of gives you a certain degree of freedom, so that the worst thing that happened to you, and you're able to transform that into something good. So what your question was,
How do we recognize when we're sabotaging ourselves, and what's the things we do most to self-sabotage?
well, if we have a setback or a failure in life, which is inevitable, do we do one of two things? Do we analyze ourselves and see what we did wrong and how we could change ourselves? Or do we immediately look outward and blame other people? Mm-hmm. That person screwed me. Society doesn't like me. Because of these circumstances, I'm screwed and I can never help it. It's the world, it's not me. That's a self-sabotaging pattern of behavior. Because if you're always pointing fingers at other people and blaming them, you're never going to learn from your experiences. And you're going to end up being quite bitter. So that's probably one of the main sources of a self-sabotaging.
So you could easily say, this stupid bee that stung my neck, that caused this blood clot and this high pressure in me, I blame the bee for this, stroke that I had. Screw you, bee. Or you could take responsibility and say, well, what did I do to my health leading up to the bee sting, for years, and taking full ownership and responsibility?
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's what you're hearing.
And the story and the perception around the experience, the way you see that movie playing out, having a positive attitude around it.
And reflecting about the role that you played in what happened. So we're not in charge of everything that happens in life. There are circumstances that are beyond our control, right? But a lot of what does happen to us is something that we do, that we are responsible for. There are amazing studies about the role of attitude and what happens to you in life. So they have this thing called the Pygmalion effect. Teachers who treat a student as if they are smart and going to do well, those students end up doing well, right? So how you treat people, how you think about yourself has a great impact on what happens to you. When doctors prescribe a new medication, there's always the same trend that when a new medication has been invented, the success rate is like 80% because people believe in it because it's new. And then 2 years later, it starts going down because it's not, it's a placebo effect. Mm-hmm. So if you believe something is going to work, if you believe that you are great and you deserve good things, that you are a good student, you will end up making those things happen. So how you look at yourself will often determine what ends up happening to yourself. So if you're talking about what causes self-sabotage, if you go through life thinking, God, I'm not really that good, there's something wrong with me. I don't really deserve good things. I don't deserve to have a lot of success or to have a lot of money. People read that off of you. A major theme in this book is that we are masters at reading people's body language and nonverbal behavior. So when somebody feels that they don't deserve things, it's kind of an off-putting quality in them, and it pushes people away. So you create self-fulfilling dynamics by how you look at yourself and your attitude. I had a chapter in the 48 Laws of Power called Think Like a King to be Treated Like One. And there's a story of Christopher Columbus, who came from dirt poor poverty, but imagined that he was royalty. And by imagining that, people started treating him like that. And as they treated him like that, he felt even more kind of greater about himself. And he was able to convince the king of Portugal to give him these ships, when in fact he was sort of a mediocre captain. So your attitude and how you think about yourself will sort of determine how people treat you and what happens in life.
Yeah, I always say that we're either, life's an enrollment game, and we're either enrolling people in our vision or unenrolling people by the way we're showing up, our energy, our language,
what do you mean by enrolling?
I'm enrolling you to come on my show.
Yeah.
And getting you to come on my show because of the energy I put out, the relationship we have, the connection, the platform. Or I'm unenrolling you by the way I've treated you over the last 6 or 7 years, by the platform being out of integrity or not doing that well. You're not going to be as excited to want to say yes.
Yeah.
You know, we're influencing people all the time.
You are influencing people
In a
all the
positive
time.
or negative way, right? It's
Yes, everything you do, people are reading and they're either saying, I like that or I don't like that,
Yes
or
or no.
I'm indifferent.
Yeah, yes is like I'm enrolling you, yes, or I'm not enrolling you is a no. And you talk about the chapter that I really like is about
Number 7.
Where are we at here? Where am I at here? Where did I get
Soften
this?
people's resistance.
No.
Okay.
Where are we at? The persuasive one.
Yeah, 7.
Is that one? Yeah, right here. The 5 strategies to becoming a master persuader. Is that this one? Yeah, right here. 7. Yeah.
Well, you, Lewis, don't need to read that chapter because you already have that kind of mastered.
But I think people need to understand this.
Yeah.
Because I think what we just talked about right there is probably one of the most powerful parts of this whole book in my mind and in life is, are you enrolling people in your vision?
Yeah.
In being the king or queen, in getting the ships that you want? Are you stepping up and enrolling people and getting people to say yes to you?
Yeah.
Or your dreams, or hire you, or date you, or marry you?
Yeah.
Or are you not showing up in a way that people want to say yes to you?
Right.
And I feel like
Key question.
my whole business has been built on getting people to say yes. When I had nothing, you know, I was on my sister's couch 10 years ago,
Yeah.
no money,
Yeah.
no skills, no degree, and it was an energy that I had to learn how to just get people to say yes, and then and then building momentum around that. So I'd love to talk about this, becoming a master persuader. And the first thing you talk about is, which I think most people aren't doing, you say is to deepen your listening and be a better listener. And most people don't have the patience to care about someone else. They're so concerned about what they think about them.
Well, people always talk about being a better listener, and their advice is usually very weak. I mean, it doesn't ineffective because, okay, I've become a better listener. Yeah, I'll try that, but it's very hard to overcome certain patterns. So I try to tackle the question of, why is it that you're not a good listener? And at the root of that is, you're more interested in yourself than you are in the other person. You won't deny that. You will say, oh, no, that's not me. That's not me. I really like people. But the truth is, you're more interested in your own thoughts and your own ideas, things that you're so certain about, your own experiences, than about that other person and what they're saying and what's going on inside them. If you can flip that around, if you can actually feel the motivation to get inside Lewis and get inside his head and his experience, then you will suddenly become a better listener. That's the key, not just telling people to listen more. The key is the quality of the listening and the emotion involved. So if I feel I want to get inside that other person, inside their life, then suddenly you will start listening. What will make you interested in other people? Well, first off is the idea you don't know them. Normally, when let's say you're on a first date with someone or you're just meeting someone, you have assumptions about them. You create a simplified version of who they are, and that's what you think, and that'll stay with you forever. Instead, you want to think, that person is more interesting than I imagine. Their first appearance isn't really who they are. They're like a book that I could read. We love going to movies and getting inside other characters and what motivates them, being taken along for a ride. Think of the people that you meet in life as a character in a movie. You want to know what motivates them. They are more interesting than you think. They've had traumas, they've had problems from their early childhood. They have fantasies. They have a shadow, a dark side to their personality they're not revealing. They're more complicated and interesting than you think. So if you're motivated to understand what makes them tick, their experience, suddenly you will start listening.
Yeah.
So that's the key to me. And it's not easy.
Why is it so hard for people? Because for me, it's been an easy thing because I've used my insecurity of not feeling like I was smart enough growing up because I was one of the poorest students in school.
Yeah.
So I was like, my voice doesn't matter as much. Let me just ask smart people what they think.
Right.
And it became a huge advantage for me.
Right.
Because I've learned that being the most interested person in the room, you become the most interesting.
Well, the key is really so much in the book is, are you motivated to change yourself? Do you want to become successful in life? This book is trying to realign your priorities and how you look at the world. Normally, your focus is on yourself and on your work and the techniques in your work, the skills you have to master. And I'm telling you, the key to success in life is people. We're a social animal. We're like dogs or wolves or whatever, chimpanzees. We're a social animal. And how we interact with people will determine how far we get. You could be brilliant at hacking computers or whatever, but if you're terrible with people, your life is going to be hell. Mm-hmm. So are you motivated to become somebody supremely skilled at understanding and working with people? That's the whole point of the book. You have to buy into that. You have to buy into the fact that you're usually bad at dealing with people. You're not seeing who they are. You're seeing reflections of your own fantasies or projections. You have to admit that you're not good at dealing with people and you need to improve. If you understand that and you want to change and you're motivated to get out of your shell, then you can make that leap. I'm a big advocate of baby steps. You're not going to suddenly transform yourself into Bill Clinton overnight.
Right. Remember thousands of people's names
or suddenly become a great listener. Mm-hmm. So every day you give yourself little tests. So you have now lunch with this person who you normally find kind of boring. All right, for 10 minutes, I'm gonna shut off my internal monologue, and I'm gonna force myself to listen to them, and I'm gonna glean some information, some nugget about their character that I never understood before. I'm gonna ask them about their childhood. I'm not gonna be like, it's not gonna be that kind of inquisition where I'm asking them, penetrating questions. But in a relaxed mood, I'm going to find out about something that really motivates them or something deep or some traumatic experience they had. You force yourself day by day to take little baby steps in which you try to learn something about people that you didn't know before and get interested in them and their experiences. You have to buy into the fact that you're usually bad at dealing with people. You're not seeing who they are, you're seeing reflections of your own. You have to admit that you're not good at dealing with people and you need to improve. If you understand that and you want to change and you're motivated to get out of your shell, then you can make that leap.